We'll do a little meditation on that. But first, let's just settle in to being here. Really drag your mind into your body. Let go of thinking about the busyness of getting here, whatever you're doing later, and try to just settle your mind. And sometimes it helps just to become aware of your body in this room, just feeling the chair or the cushion against the body, the temperature of the room against the skin, aware of noises. And then bring your awareness to the sensation of the breath going in and out of the body, either at the tip of your nose or as your belly rises and falls. And allow your mind to just settle here. Now try to bring to mind the reason you came this evening. And based on that reason, generate a positive intention to use your time well. And try to include the wish that it not just benefit yourself, but that it will ripple out to benefit others. So one of the reasons Buddhism looks at death is to inspire us to use our time well. So there's a simple meditation on death, 9 points on death. And there are 3 roots and 9 reasons. So the first root is that death is definite. No one can stop death. We cannot increase the amount of time we have left. And the time we have to work on our spiritual path, to transform our habits of mind, is limited. When you think about the number of hours you have in a day, how many of them are caught up with work, with sleep, taking care of the body, eating and exercise, there's little time left over to focus on our inner being, So consider that since nothing can prevent our deaths, that if we want to make progress on our spiritual path, we need to make the time to practice the Dharma. And that time is now, or we'll never get to it. So we know death is certain. And we need to remember that the time of death is uncertain. We do not know how much time we have left. Death can come at any time. Healthy people die. Young people die. People may get sick and have drawn-out illnesses. Others may just lose their life in an instant. In a car wreck, heart attack, or their heart just stops beating. Many things can cause our death. Just about everything that we need can also be a cause of our death. So if we want to make progress on our spiritual path, really there's no time to wait. If we think we'll do it when we retire, that time might never arrive. Think we'll do it when we feel better, that time may never arrive. But right now we have better conditions than most people. We're not just trying to survive. When our time to die comes, nothing can really help us except our practice, our habits of mind. Our body can't help us because it is our body that is failing. Possessions can't help us. Our friends can't help us. if we practice, the results of our practice can help. If we practice now, it's more likely we'll have a mind at ease. If we practice having a mind at ease, then it's more likely that at the time of our death, our mind won't be disturbed. So we want to rejoice in our good conditions, this precious human body, and use our time well. The fact that we even have time to use for our inner being is wonderful. We use the time well, and at the time of death, it's less likely we'll feel we have wasted this life. Take a moment to rejoice that you showed up this evening. You've taken some time to work on your mind. And rejoice that there are others with you. There are others who wish to work on their mind. So again, return to your motivation for coming tonight and strengthen your resolve to use your time well. And when you feel ready, just gently open your eyes. Wait till it's ready for you. Okay, so I think this is the fourth night? I don't know. Third. All right.
Fourth.
Fourth. Okay. Whatever. What?
The last one, if it's the fourth.
No, we have, we meet next week.
All the way through like the 13th?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, that's right, because Venerable Amy's coming.
Amy's in.
That's right, okay.
Yeah. So, all right. So now we're, okay. So we're looking at the overview of the entire path from our ordinary little minds now to developing it to the mind of enlightenment. And so our main textbook, you could say, the graduated path, on the stages of the path. The grade treatise on the stages, on the graduated path to enlightenment. The stages of the graduated path to enlightenment. Anyway, the Lam Rim. And so they talk about 3 capacities of students. One who's sort of the beginner, and so their main goal is to learn about how they can make sure to have another good rebirth, okay, and have less suffering and more happiness. And then you have a middle capacity person who wants to get out of cyclic existence, this cycle of suffering, of birth and death and everything in between, mostly aging, illness. So, and then you have the great capacity of those students who really want to not only get liberated from cyclic existence, but they want to become fully enlightened in order to benefit others, benefit us, the ordinary beings still stuck here. So, so right now, we're going to look at the middle capacity being. So, the middle capacity person needs to focus on the 4 Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, those 4. The 12 links of dependent arising. The 12 links of dependent arising is just the how we cycle. So it's about the process of birth and death and rebirth and death and rebirth and death. So what are the links? And these, of course, are states of mind, that keep us stuck in samsara. And then if someone wants to be liberated from cyclic existence, they really have to realize renunciation. When I say realize, that means that there's no doubts, it's an unshakable state, or unshakable? Anyway, unshakable state of mind, that influences, all their thoughts. So renunciation, which is this desire to get out. So you're basically saying, I've had enough of cyclic existence, I want to get out. You're no longer attracted to this way of existing at all. It just doesn't come up. You're not pulled that way at all. You've also developed your ability to concentrate to the point of calm abiding, where you can place your mind on an object for as long as you want, and whatever way you want, you can be buying your groceries. There's nothing that will distract you on whatever it is you've chosen to focus on. And that is the state of concentration which we need in order to be able to realize how things actually exist. So that's the wisdom. So it's the wisdom, that counters root ignorance, and so we'll talk about that. So all of these, just water should do it, I think. I don't know, my throat does this now. It's a new normal. Okay, so the main activity is to really see the faults of cyclic existence, abandon attachment for the pleasures of cyclic existence, develop the intention to definitely emerge from cyclic existence. So that's what renunciation is. Renunciation is about recognizing that there's really nothing in cyclic existence that's worth the price we pay in terms of suffering. So we'd rather find out how to get out. So it goes beyond just wanting to have, to do what you need to do in order to have, good conditions in the next life. It's really wanting to recognize that, even a good life is still not so great in samsara. So, the 4 Noble Truths, so the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, the truth of that suffering can end, and the truth of the path of how to end suffering. When they realize these 4 Noble Truths, that means that they have no doubts of the truth of suffering. They have no doubt about what causes suffering. They have no doubt that suffering can end, and they have no doubt about the path. You know, so they've studied the teachings on the Four Noble Truths. They've reflected on them, and they've generated a very strong mind. And this is how renunciation is possible. You know, you're no longer seduced by the pleasures of cyclic existence. So I've got about 17 times. We don't need that one. Okay, so the truth of suffering. We've talked about the 3 types of suffering. I don't know if we've done that in this class. No. Okay. So there are 3 types of suffering according to Buddha. There's the suffering of suffering, which is what we all know to be suffering. Pain and physical pain, mental pain. Then there's the suffering of change, which is what we call happiness, what we call pleasure. So it is actually the relief of whatever is unpleasant. That relief we call pleasure. So when we're hungry and we eat, the relief from the hunger, or if we're craving chocolate, and the relief from that craving because we've eaten chocolate, or we're eating chocolate, because as soon as it's gone, the craving arises again. So it's this constant attempt to try to stop the unpleasant. And whenever we succeed in stopping the unpleasant, that relief from it is called pleasure. And so when we really start looking at our minds and see how much we're chasing pleasure and not comfortable with this moment, we want something in this moment to change, then we have a better understanding of the suffering of change. Because of course then when we relieve that suffering, that's also, the relief is temporary. And so then we start to suffer again. Then the all-pervasive suffering of conditioning is the nature of the existence in cyclic existence. That because of the way cyclic existence is, we're born in bodies that can be harmed, they're going to die, there's no satisfaction in cyclic existence because every time you think you've got it, it's impermanent. So you have to create it again. Do you ever have those moments where you think, I finally, figured it out, and then, no. But it was nice while it lasted, kind of thing. Well, that's sort of the all-pervasive suffering of conditionality. It's conditioned on these contaminated aggregates. They're contaminated because they're arising due to ignorance. They're arising due to our karma. They're not like the aggregates of a Buddha, which don't arise due to ignorance. So this is an analogy. So for the suffering of suffering, say you've got a burn, you burned your skin. So when we first burn ourselves with, say, hot water, we can experience very strong physical pain. And maybe even the suffering arises in our mind as well, like, I can't believe I just poured hot water all over myself. So this very strong pain that we experience at the time of burning is an example of the suffering of suffering. The mental suffering that arises with it is also the suffering of suffering. We all kind of get this one. The suffering of change is when we apply, like, cool aloe to our burn. That pleasure of the relief of that pain is the suffering of change. So that lessening of a feeling of suffering. This is the one that gives us so much trouble. Because we tend to chase craving. And our craving goes in 2 directions. We have the craving for what we like, or enjoy what is pleasant to us, and we have the craving to be separated from everything that we don't enjoy. Even the stuff that's just boring. It's not that it's unpleasant, it's just boring.
I have a question.
Yep.
So in this case, if I have a, like, the Buddha would have just not put the cream.
No, the Buddha just doesn't have this suffering. The Buddha hasn't created the cause for suffering. The Buddha has uncovered the truth of suffering and the truth of the cause of suffering and the truth of the suffering can end and how to end it, and has succeeded.
Right.
Now, it's a big view. So, when you're liberated from samsara, from cyclic existence, you don't experience the suffering of samsara at all. It doesn't arise. You quit creating the cause. So when, like if Shakyamuni Buddha, who manifested as a human being for our benefit to teach us, would look like he has all the sufferings of samsara because we can't see an enlightened being in its, natural state, you could say. So we don't have the ability to do that. But the mind of a Buddha doesn't experience suffering because he's created no cause for that. No enlightened being experiences suffering. That's part of the definition of enlightened. No liberated being experiences suffering, yes.
And on this case, although it's causing some sort of relief, is still considered suffering because it's only temporary.
Because it's temporary. Dissatisfaction will arise again. That's what the Buddha's point is. If we're really seeking some sort of lasting contentment, happiness, whatever we call it, we're not going to find it in this kind of existence. It doesn't exist here. Everything here is impermanent. Everything's unreliable. Because it's arising from ignorance. So this is where we have to put all the pieces together. We have to, and this is what all the modules in Discovering Buddhism talk about, these pieces. So we have a module on karma. We have a module on, death and rebirth. We have a module on samsara and, how to get liberated from samsara. We have all these, so we can go into great detail on each of these parts. Because in order to really be able to effectively reflect on these things and overcome our habits of mind thinking, craving's not so bad, we have to remember all the pieces of the puzzle. We need to remember that everything we experience in samsara, and that just means what? Pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral, is a result of the potency we placed on our mind stream at the time of previous actions. So literally everything we're experiencing is just a manifestation of our past actions, our karma. So if we, so it can't be reliable because it's coming from ignorance. And we'll go into that in a minute. So after some time, as long as there is no contact with the wound, we don't feel it. This is the feeling of equanimity. Just nothing going on there. Even though there is no actual pain at that moment, there is still the potential for pain. Because all we need to do is touch our wound and the pain resurfaces. This is the potential that's available to us in every moment of samsara. So we may not be in pain in this moment, but the potential for pain to arise is pervasive. We can't prevent it. We can take excellent care of our bodies. We can take excellent care of our mind. But we can still fall downstairs because one pushes us downstairs. So, we still suffer because the nature of samsara is suffering. Whereas an enlightened being, someone who's liberated, who doesn't have ignorance driving every moment of mind, moment of body, moment of speech, is not, what they're experiencing isn't a manifestation of ignorance. They're liberated from that. They have corrected the mind of ignorance by developing wisdom. So as long as our aggregates, meaning the body and then all our states of mind, the afflictive states of mind and past actions, we can expect sufferings. The conditions for suffering to occur can arise in any moment because we have a contaminated body and mind. So this is pervasive suffering, conditionality. It's called lots of things, but usually they've got pervasive in it somewhere, and or conditionings. So suffering has a cause. So the potency of actions placed on the mind at the time of every single action of body, speech, and mind, that's what ripens in this life, you know. So that's one of the causes of our suffering, is that we've done past actions and they're going to have a result that ripens in the future. And that's what our experience of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral is. It's a ripening of this potency, all the different potencies. And then there's delusion. That's the ignorance and the disturbing states of mind or negative states of mind that arise from our ignorance. So both of these, you know, is what causes our suffering. So ignorance, you know, and it's very basic. It's the state of not knowing. And in this, you know, so not knowing how things exist, not knowing how, you know, the nature of reality, and not understanding cause and effect, you know, all sorts of things. But in particular, in this context of samsara, what keeps us stuck in samsara, it's the ignorance that grasps at a self. You know, that this is, you know, so when you hear teachings on no self or, you know, this is what it's talking about, that we need to understand how the self exists. And the way we hold it to exist while we're stuck in samsara is inaccurate. We've got a misunderstanding about how we exist. Sometimes it's just called fundamental confusion. And when we overcome that fundamental confusion, we'll be liberated. Because it's that fundamental confusion that all our disturbing states of mind arise from. So all our anger and hatred and greed and jealousy, all of that comes from misunderstanding how we exist. And if you correct that misunderstanding, there's no basis for these disturbing states of mind to arise. So contaminated aggregates just means that the body and mind that are manifesting due to ignorance. So our inability to control our death and rebirth is coming from our ignorance. And then all the states of mind that arise are influenced by this grasping at a self. I do think this course is so hard because it's just like, oh, you know, too much information.
I am confused. Suffering of samsara, where does that place? Because we were talking about the 3 types of suffering.
Mm-hmm.
This is another one?
Nope. This is just a description of samsara.
Oh.
Samsara is uncontrolled birth and death and rebirth and death.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, as we observe the self, our minds become inflated. We develop a belief that this very self is either permanent, and so we have beliefs in souls, things that don't change at all, that exist, you know, always, or we think we're in you know, there's a danger of annihilation, that we will cease to exist completely. These are the two extremes. Thinking we're permanent, or thinking that we'll cease to exist completely, that will be annihilated. No self does not mean we'll be annihilated. No self is getting at that we are neither this, we don't have a permanent, unchanging nature, nor are we going to be annihilated. Hence why we might want to interrupt this uncontrolled cycle of birth and death, because it's going to continue. So, might as well exist in a way that is not suffering. So karma and delusions are both causes for cyclic existence, or samsara. But the delusions, the ignorance and all the states of mind that arise from that, are the primary thing that keeps us stuck. Because there's a point at which that, in spite of the fact that you have all these potencies on your mind stream that were placed doing contaminated actions of body, speech, and mind, but when you realize emptiness and perfect that realization of emptiness, and you're liberated, those potencies can never produce a result. So it's not like you have to, erase all your karma, or purify all your karma, or exhaust all your karma. No, you have to get a handle on ignorance and the states of mind that arise to do that. So once you have control over your disturbed states of mind, that helps you with your ability to penetrate this misunderstanding about how things exist, so that you can cultivate wisdom and get out. So it's not like we have to worry about how many eons of past actions we have, and that's because you're never going to exhaust all of them. As long as you're stuck in samsara, all you're doing is creating more. But if you penetrate reality, that will stop. I lost anybody. Yes.
Is that realizing emptiness?
Yes, directly.
Correct.
So it's an experience of how things exist. It's not thinking about it. You actually have, right now our experience is of samsara. When you have an experience of how things actually exist, it's not this. Which I can't explain because it's inconceivable and indescribable. It's the absence of this. It's the absence of the appearance that we have, that we hold on to, that things exist in some sort of permanent, inherent way. So first we mistake how the self exists, how me and mind exist, and then right away we mistake how other exist. And then we mistake how all phenomena exist. We think everything exists in the same way. So in our tradition we talk about not just the self of persons, but the self of phenomena, that we think this exists inherently, that we think this exists inherently. And what we need to understand is nothing exists that way. Not me, not you, and not form. So we grasp at a self, but it's not just that we grasp at a self, not a mere self, because a mere self exists. So this is jargon. So the self that goes from life to life is a mere self. The self that, and the Buddha, has a mere self. It doesn't have to go life to life. It's no longer stuck in this cycle. But it exists. We grasp it as self-sufficient and inherently existent self. And this is this idea that we have that we exist somehow independent of causes and conditions. Intellectually, we know we don't exist separate from causes and conditions. We see change all the time. We know that, we had to be born for this body to exist. But we grasp after things as if somehow they really do exist in some way independent of those causes and conditions. That yes, all those causes and conditions have to happen, but it appears like, oh, there's a tendron here that has a certain tendron nature that's always been here. Might not be called tendron, but it's, I have a nature. And that nature is what's permanent. And that exists inherently. And the Buddha said that's where we make a mistake. Is we grasp at a sense of self that is independent, permanent, concrete, eternal, all of those things, and it doesn't exist that way. So this takes lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of thinking about. Because intellectually it's not too difficult, but to actually recognize how we're not acting from our reasoning. When somebody gets mad at us, we see an inherently existing, independent, self-sufficient, not nice person yelling at us. We forget all about dependent arising. We see that person is like 100% that way. And they're just a jerk. We respond to things that way. So we're shocked when something breaks. Maybe not if it's super fragile, like you drop the dozen eggs and they broke. Well, not too big of a surprise. But we actually are startled when things break. That is a clue to how we hold things to exist in some sort of permanent way. Even though intellectually we know that's not true. But we still grasp it as if they do. And this is a source of our suffering. So based upon that sense of self, we also do it with everything that we consider mine. My stuff, my car, my family, my job, my whatever. We think it too has an inherently existent nature. And so the way things appear to us, the way we kind of react when we're in, when we're not thinking intellectually, we're not reasoning, we think things, just arise without a cause. Like when we feel like someone's yelling at us for no reason. I didn't do anything. We think things don't have parts. They're not dependent on their parts. We think they're distinct, sort of independent and separate from everything else. We lose sight of our interconnectedness. And we really think there's a nature that comes from the side of the object. And we completely forget that we see everything through our own perspective. That when everybody who's sitting here has two eyes, so we think we're in the center of whatever. Which is just our perspective, our point of view. Just like the same way, I'm the only me in this room. Wrong. Every one of you is a me. I think y'all are all other. No. Y'all are all selves. But we live our lives and respond to everything that's happening as if there isn't a point of view. We lose sight of that. So everything is being filtered with our own lens, and the Buddha said our lens is wrong because we grasp it as self. We misunderstand how we exist. And this is the basis for all our disturbing states of mind. So this takes a lot of thought. Really? Just because I grasp it as self or I forget all this interdependence and, da-da-da-da-da. That's why all these negative things arise. So it takes a lot of reflection about our states of mind and it's observation of what's going on in our mind. So it's not enough to be able to look at a list of things to think about according to the Buddha and you'll have it. It's not like that. You have to really work with it, observe, and then finally have this, slowly, it becomes more and more clear to you that you're grasping, that you're just reacting from your own point of view, and that point of view is distorted, and so you're kind of creating your own suffering. So the afflictions, so this is jargon, so you have, afflictions are just states of mind that are contaminated, and they're negative. Sometimes they're called mental factors, disturbing minds. In Sanskrit, they're kleshas, delusions, disturbing emotion, negativity. So you have a lot. But it's those. But all it means are minds that lead to suffering.
Great.
Oh, it's rain.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
I forget that you hear it so clearly. People don't. Except sometimes it rains through.
Oh boy.
So the afflicted states of mind are negative thoughts of attachment, aversion, hatred, greed, jealousy. These are often accompanied by negative speech and negative physical actions. And each of these things, each of these moments of mind and actions of body and speech, place a potency on our mind. This is, placing a seed. This is where our habits come from. We have tendencies towards thinking certain ways because we practice them. So this is just sort of one of those lists. Buddhism's into list. So basically, we have, they'll often refer to either 3 poisons or 10 root afflictions. The 3 poisons are attachment, hatred, and ignorance. The 10 root afflictions are attachment, hatred, pride, ignorance, doubt, and then 5 wrong views or afflicted views. We're not going to go into this in great detail because we have a whole course on that. So, but the main one. So, and the cause for delusions arise. So how does this work? So there's a basis. The basis is our mind. The basis are those seeds and imprints, those habits we've developed. That's the basis of a disturbing state of mind to arise. If we didn't have it, it couldn't arise. Then there's the external object. And that's just the condition. So we see an object, and because of our habits of mind, we see it as pleasant or unpleasant, the ripening of karma. So it's distorted. Our view of the object isn't free of distortion. Because nothing that we experience is free of distortion as long as we're under the influence of ignorance. And then, because of mental distraction, I'm sure we're pretty familiar with distraction. That can be a cause for, like, you get very, like, maybe you're not even really what you could call distracted. Like, say you're checking your rear view mirror and the person in front of you slammed on their brakes. So you're checking your rear view mirror so you can't see the person, because it happens like that. But then you crash and you go, Impure advice. Sometimes the language is so interesting. Impure advice is the thoughts we're telling ourselves, our own stories that we've got going in our mind, or the TV shows we watch, or the books we read, or our friends who are not so wise, But all of these things can be the cause of disturbing emotions to arise. Like our friends who go, I can't believe he said that to you. So you go, oh. And so then, anger comes from that. Or, that feeling of being indignant. Habit is one of our main ones. We just have the habit of responding this way to these situations. And so we keep practicing that habit, so it's even more likely to come up. Because everything we practice gets stronger. And then inappropriate attention is the story we create in that moment. We feed our anger, we feed our craving. We just, so we're focusing on exactly the wrong things. Incorrect information, like negative, that, oh, this is 100% negative, or this is 100% desirable, all of that. So all this is going on all the time. But its root is ignorance. So attachment is the state of mind that perceives something as attractive because it's pleasant to us. So we have the experience of pleasant, and it exaggerates the attractiveness of the object and wants to hold on to it or have it. Like sometimes that object of attachment is walking by. We don't have it. So hatred, so it's usually translated as anger, but it's that state of mind that is responding to something, an object that's unpleasant, and it's exaggerating the negative aspects of the object. Could be making them all up. It may not just be an exaggeration. It becomes kind of hostile due to it, and certainly wants to escape the object, but may even, with enough feeding, you want to harm it. Sometimes we do this to ourselves. We treat ourselves with a mind of hatred. That's what, so when we're caught in the habit of exaggerating our weaknesses, or our unskillfulness, or our negativities, we're practicing the mind of anger and hatred towards ourselves. So the object can be us, and that's also a habit we don't want to practice, because it's the same mind. It doesn't matter what the object is. It's a mind that is inaccurate. This is sometimes thrown in with pride. So pride is the mental factor that grasps at feeling superior to others. So sometimes the low self-esteem is sometimes talked about in terms of pride, that we're on the other end of the continuum. We see ourselves as the worst, and we cling to that. But it's I always have to put it's a puffing up of the mind, because I think that's a great translation. So we're exaggerating the good qualities of ourselves, and in particular, we see ourselves as superior to others. That's the aspect of pride that we're talking about here. It's not confidence. It's incorrect. It's a false view of the self, of thinking that you're better than. So ignorance, we'll talk a lot more about this, but the ignorance that's one of the root afflictions, just of the 10 root list, there's so many, it's just the ignorance of not knowing, like not knowing karma, not knowing past and future lives, not knowing da-da-da-da. Doubt is the mind, it's easy to see doubt as an affliction when your doubt is tending towards what's wrong, a wrong view. Often, like when you're studying, you might have doubt that tends towards what the Buddha said is correct view. But we're not sure yet. We're still a little too, we have two minds about it. Sometimes we feel like, oh yeah, maybe yes, maybe no, past and future lives, maybe yes, maybe no. So, we're still on the fence. And this can become a great obstacle You know, if you can't move forward out of doubt and develop conviction, you'll just stay stuck in doubt. And it usually means you're not attending to your doubts. You know, you're not looking at them and experimenting, bringing in reasoning, looking more information, whatever. You know. And then there are 5 that are views. So the root of samsara, the ignorance that is this grasping at a self, the transitory collections jargon, it just means this temporary body and mind. Holding to an extreme, thinking that sacrificing animals will remove you from suffering. Holding to a view as supreme, you know, my view's the only view. If you don't hold my view, you'll never be free of suffering. Holding to a practice as supreme is, you know, this might be the slaughtering animals. But all of these are just versions of wrong views. Thinking that karma doesn't exist. You know, stuff like that. But the main 3 are the attachment, the anger, hatred, and ignorance, the self-grasping. So, Dharmakirti, who wrote the textbook on logic, Tibetan Buddhism. So once there is a self, there is an idea of an other. On behalf of self and other, there is attachment and hostility. All of the faults come about in association with these. So it starts with the ignorance about how we exist. We generalize it to how everything exists. And then we have attachment for the self and hostility for other. Just a reminder, you know, the Buddha did not invent cause and effect, the law of karma, just like Newton didn't invent gravity, he just observed it and described it. The Buddha just observed with cause and effect. And then he taught it as a way to help us end our suffering. So it's not a system of judgment. It just is just like, you know, cause and effect, you know, planting an apple seed and everything, if all the conditions are there, you'll get an apple tree. So it's just bringing consciousness into it, that the way we think, our motivation for doing things, the way, you know, has an effect. So ignorance leads to disturbing emotions, which lead to actions, which lead to seeds being placed in your mind stream, the potencies, which lead to negative results. Then you also have ignorance, contaminated virtues. So virtues are contaminated by ignorance. You know, so our habits are good qualities. Our compassion, our love, you know, our unconditional love, our love without attachment, our compassion, our generosity, our patience, our, you know, whatever, all our wisdom. You know, since we are under the influence of ignorance, they are contaminated, they're not pure. But these also lead to action, which place potencies in our mind stream, and this results in positive experiences. And, you know, I always, you know, it's easy to forget this side of things. This is also going on. So every moment of experience, whether pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, is the result of a ripening of a potency placed in our mind by an action influenced by ignorance of our body, speech, or mind that we committed at some time in our past. So literally, every experience of something pleasant, every time you experience something pleasant, that's the result of a past positive action. So it's good to notice those. Oh, this is nice. And go, oh, okay. There's a cause for happiness. Because the root of suffering is a mistaken conception, the ignorance is just getting it wrong. We just have the wrong idea of how we exist. We can cut the root of samsara, get out of cyclic existence by developing the correct view. And then becoming quite familiar with it. This is why they meditate on emptiness. And once you have a cessation of ignorance, you're freed of samsara. Hey. So if you don't have a cause of suffering, you can't experience a result of suffering. Because remember what we said about karma. Karma is definite. So if you don't create the cause, you can't experience the result. So this is just, it really is as simple as this. The example they always give is about the rope, mistaking a rope for a snake. And once you know it's a rope, you no longer have that basis for the thought that it's a snake. It may still appear to be a snake because it's still, it's in the corner over there, there's not much light, but now you know it's not. And that knowledge cannot be taken away.
I had a question because I know we spoke about that a few weeks ago. I know it's not a snake, but just the beginning thought of like, oh my God, you're being just cautious. Is that still considered?
Well, it's still coming from ignorance.
But let's say you're in the woods. You know there's snakes
It's
everywhere.
still ignorance because it's not true.
Right.
It isn't a snake. It's not that you're stupid for responding to the appearance of a snake. It's just that it is ignorance that is the basis for you having any reaction at all that says because it's a snake. The mind's just wrong. No big deal. It's just wrong. So what the Buddha's saying is that because we are under that influence of ignorance, so we mistake the way things appear as to be that things exist in a particular way, we have all sorts of unskillful states of mind arise. And this is what ends up ripening as suffering. And if we remove the ignorance, then those states of mind simply can't arise. It's not a judgment about the state of mind. This is why it's not a teaching on morality. It's a teaching of what literally happens. If you do this, this is the result. Nobody can change it. It's the law of, it's just like gravity, sort of. But so it's not this like all those enlightened beings out there going, God, she's still getting it wrong. It's throwing some terrible things down. It's not like that.
But it's a habit. It's a habit that you've had, to
Since
react,
beginningless time.
to react that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're saying like once you realize that this is your habit, you
Right.
change that habit. That's the start to getting out of
Yeah.
the samsara.
Yeah. So if you recognize that the reason you're reacting to this person as an enemy is because they don't help you, that they're somehow you see them as an obstacle to you getting what you want, and you realize, oh, that's ridiculous. That's not how, that's never going to lead me to happiness, is thinking this person's my enemy. And making actions on the basis of them as an enemy is actually going to lead me to actions of suffering that will cause suffering.
And you think they're your enemy because of something that may have developed
No.
that habit of thinking that this type of person is
Because
bad.
you're attached to the self. So this person isn't to your liking. They talk in a way you don't like, or they have the wrong facial expression, or they don't help. They're just not someone you see as,
Yeah.
this is
Right.
not someone that's making my life better.
Right.
So we respond to them as a being that's sort of in our way.
Yeah, someone you don't like.
Yeah, they're an absolute. If I hate to hang out with him,
Yeah.
there's no chance for happiness.
Yeah.
That's attachment to the self. That's thinking that getting what I want is what brings happiness. And the Buddha said, sorry, that's not how it
Right.
works. You know, you are holding this person to exist in a way that they don't exist at all. It's all entirely from your point of view. They're an enemy only because they don't suit you. They don't change. If he kind of shows up tomorrow with $1,000 for you, suddenly, you know, they're not so bad.
I understand that.
Mhm.
But what if, I don't judge people, but I do, like, I've been in situations that, like, if I see a male out in the street, young, or I do get scared, especially when I'm with the kids. And it's not that I have something against them, it's that I've been robbed so many times. So I'm not judging the person, I'm just being cautious.
Well, right. It's not that we don't have to assess.
Right. Oh, okay. Because I
Because
don't
we
want to
live in
feel.
samsara.
Oh. Okay.
Something bad can happen, and often does. So it's
Okay.
not about that.
Okay.
It's about then going from that to saying, oh, this is an evil being.
Oh, okay, okay.
We have to make assessments. What we need to watch for is how we turn our assessments of situations into inherent labels of things, you know. So it's just, you know, all young men who wear hoodies, you know, beware, you know, it's just, you know, it's you know, we have these things, and we go from being cautious or wise about, you know, it's like, you know, they, from, you know, ever since there were, street lights, you know, women are taught to park near them. So don't park on a dark street, you know. There's this caution. It's not that every male out there is
Right.
going to rape you,
Right.
but hey, you know, let's
cautious.
make it even more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's not about, you know, but we do that though, don't we? We get into a mindset that then says, "Ah, I can read people. I know they weren't safe. You know, we go beyond just being practical. And this is coming from our ignorance about how things exist. This is an exaggeration. It's just like the fact that, you know, like, because I've been robbed so many times, I'm certain I'll be robbed next time. You know, that kind of thing. And then you've leaped. You know.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of mind we want to watch. Because they're just wrong. They're incorrect assertions. And so we can work that out with our reasoning. It doesn't mean we're not still cautious. It's about we don't want our actions of body and speech to be erroneous thoughts about people or sentient beings or objects. You know, well, I can't have an orange car. I couldn't be seen in an orange car. You know, I don't want that car. It's probably not a very good car because it's orange. I mean, we do that. We make up these things in our head. We had an orange Volkswagen for a while when I was growing up. Orange? Really? So,
They'll see you coming. Orange is a good color.
I'm sure that's why my dad got it. Because his son had just totaled
A black car.
little one of those Porsche 914s, or you know, the cheap Porsche that came out. It wasn't seen. Yeah, it was really cheap, you know, and it wasn't seen. And it totaled the car. I had to climb out of the roof because it was only this, you know. So he and his girlfriend, you know. So you know. So he got a slightly taller car.
And orange.
But it was orange. So, anyway. So yes, it's this process of recognizing, where is my mind taking this story? We make up stories. Where is it going? And does it make any sense? You know, and am I clinging to something about it? Those are the mistakes that we make. And then they become habits. If you feel like somehow if you notice everything that could go wrong, it won't happen, that can just become a habit of looking at things that you perceive as negative. And then you're just consumed by that. So it might have started out as this, you had this idea, well, maybe I can prevent things from happening if I'm aware of possibilities, And you hope, it's like carrying your umbrella and hoping it won't rain because you're carrying the umbrella. That's, that's where it gets ridiculous. They get superstitious. But then these habits become, they lead to really negative directions. Does that make sense? Who cares? So samsara is the Sanskrit word for cyclic existence. And what we're cycling is death and rebirth. And so we're experiencing the results of our contaminated actions. Because you don't even accumulate karma once you're liberated. Karma is just referring to the law of cause and effect in samsara. Nirvana is a state of liberation in which ignorance and the afflictive emotions have been completely removed. There's no longer rebirth, and this results in peace. And it's irreversible. You never go back to thinking things exist inherently, because now you know they don't. The mind's ability, the faculty of the mind is to know. If you provide it with correct information, it can develop this conviction. Because nothing that happens will ever shake that conviction. If it's a correct state of mind, there's never going to be proof that it's not. Now we can delude ourselves, in the meantime. But, once you develop these actual, experience of emptiness, perfect that understanding, the wisdom that's from that, you're never going to go back. So these are states of mind. They're not places. So this tanka you might see outside of meditation halls in the Tibetan tradition. It's called the Wheel of Life. I think there's one hanging out there by our door, correct? So it's a depiction of the links of cyclic existence. So if you get a chance, you can look at it. And in the center of it, and this one I don't think is I should say it's not correct, but it's not the traditional way, I think, where the tails of the snake and the rooster are in the, they're sort of like in the mouth of the pig, which is ignorance, blah, blah. Anyway, we don't need to go through all those details. Okay, so the 12 links of cyclic existence, how we get, how we are stuck and how we continue to be stuck, come from these 12 events. So we have this ignorance of how we exist. And we just have an innate link. We just, we grasp at the self. Karmic formation is an action. Sometimes it's called something else, which escapes me. This is the mind at the time that you've done the action. That is, in other words, you're placing a potency on your mind. Okay? So it's just a moment. That consciousness, so the third link is the consciousness you place. You've done an action, it places a seed. Okay? So you have ignorance, then the action, then the consciousness it's placed on. From that, these are not in order of how they occur. These are just the 12 links. So you have name and form, which is the aggregates which are just the body and mind. We talk about the 5 aggregates because they specify 4 types of mind, but it's the body and the mind. Our sense bases, which means because in Buddhism they consider, all the senses are also, the sense organs are a condition for sense consciousnesses to arise. So they don't just talk about the brain or something, they say you have, eye awareness, ear awareness, nose awareness, taste awareness. These are all dependent on a physical support, and they cease when this body dies. Or they, because they can't function without that physical support. But there's also the mental consciousness, which is not dependent on a physical support. And then name is the label we place on it. So, babies don't necessarily have the label yet. 6 sense bases, those are, these are the bases for those sense consciousnesses. Contact means when your mind and an object and connect. So you have, that can only happen if your mind exists, basically. So you have a previous moment of mind, that's the condition for being able to have the next moment of mind. That next moment of mind, so every moment of mind has an object. We don't just, it always has an object. So when they connect with the object, so when it's a sense object, then you also need that physical sense power working. So a person who is blind doesn't have that sense power working. So a visual object cannot arise. They can't have an awareness of a visual object. Then you have feeling. Craving. So feeling is a subtle thing of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. It's just the experience you have. But it's followed up by grasping or craving. Well, it's followed up by craving, which is that desire to be near it if it's pleasant, the desire to be away from it if it's unpleasant. And then you have grasping, which is just an intense form. That's when I have to have. Or I'll die if it doesn't go away. It's just more intense. And then you have becoming or existence. This is the mind at the time of death. So whatever condition, so whatever state of mind arises at the time of death is the condition for a seed to ripen. So some karmic seed that was complete, that has the power to project you into a rebirth, ripens at the time of death. And it determines your, the kind of rebirth you have. So this is why we want to have a really positive mind at the time of death. So it's a good condition for a good rebirth, as opposed to a mind of hatred or a mind of attachment. I can't leave my kids, whatever. Those cause disturbing emotions to arise. Then rebirth is when consciousness enters the fertilized egg, which I believe, if I read Rinpoche's book on death and dying accurately, is at the time when the egg gets implanted. It's when it takes root in the woman's body.
Probably, because that's when it's actually
It's
formed.
it's stable.
It's
Yes.
stable.
Asking what he thinks is, what he says rebirth is, at what moment it occurs.
Yeah.
I think it is, he states the moment, conception, right?
Yeah,
Is that-
but
is
not
it
exactly.
before?
See, I think it's a little bit later. It's when the egg, the fertilized egg, actually becomes implanted in the placenta starts or something. I don't know. I didn't have children. I don't know all the jargon. So but it's not just at when it's fertilized. It's a stage beyond that. That's not what the
That's the
traditional
second
texts say, but he published a book recently that goes into more detail about it. So that's my understanding. And then in the very next moment, you're aging, you're going to die. Without birth, you can't die. So this is just talking about this cycle of birth and death. We have lots of we have lots of other things ripening all the time in every moment. But this particular ripening is about the moment of death, and and then when you're reborn. So if you go to the bardo, you'll be a birth in the bardo, and then you'll have another death, and you'll be born in the next life. So it can take up to 3 lives for all of these links to happen. It cannot take place in one because, it's our past karmic seeds, all this kind of stuff. I mean, it just takes more than one life. So in the first life, you must have the projecting causes, which is that the ignorance, and then the action, and then the consciousness at the time that potency is placed on the mind. So it has to be a complete action. It has, it has certain qualities for it to be able to be a projecting karma. In other words, it has the power to project a rebirth. Not all our actions are complete, so they can't, if they don't have that power. Then establishing causes can happen in that same life or in another life. And that second life doesn't have to be the next life. It can be eons away. There's no instant karma here. So that 8, 9, and 10 are what? Make sure I get it right. The craving, grasping,
and becoming
at the time of death. So it's what ripens that seed. It's you have to have, so craving is a condition for a seed to ripen. So the craving that ripens before death is a really important one. So, and then that in the grasping, and then the becoming. So that's those 2 sets of things have to happen either in the first life or in the first and second. Then, once that's happened, because this happens at the time of death, all the rest of the links happen in the very next life. So we're talking about the moment of death and these establishing causes, and then, then you have the, mind enters the fertilized egg if you're going to be born, a mammal or human or whatever else gets born from eggs. Do reptiles get born from eggs?
Well,
Yeah,
what type of
another
eggs-
thing in
What type of
common.
eggs are we talking about?
Eggs.
Eggs. Well,
Eggs.
Dinosaur eggs.
Eggs that need fertilizing.
Big one egg.
but okay.
That's it. I don't think amoebas have it. Amoebas get born from heat or there are 4 types of rebirth.
Because I was thinking more of like eggs or hatching. Eggs.
Yeah, because that's an egg. That's a fertilized
Yeah,
egg.
yeah. I guess it.
It's the same thing.
Same thing.
So if you're gonna be born a chick, that's where you're gonna go. You're gonna be your mind's gonna go straight into that chicken egg. Or hen egg, yes. I mean, it's not just humans. So it's a womb birth. Is sometimes how we describe it. A birth from the womb.
But this isn't literally like life one, like what you're talking about is like it could be in any cyclic existence at any given time on any.
This describes one
this is
cycle,
this is one cycle in
a complete cycle.
a period of.
It doesn't have any period
Doesn't have
assigned
any
to it.
periods. That's what.
Because the projecting causes and establishing causes, or the projecting causes in particular, can be eons.
Right.
But as soon as the establishing causes arise, because those are the moments of death, then that next life, because it's projecting you into that next life. What's ripening at that's what that establishing causes means.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
establishing the condition for your rebirth.
And that's going to be in yeah.
That's sequential.
Secure, yeah.
Okay. And then the completing karmas, for your life, start to activate when you take birth. Not birth, but when the mind goes into that egg. So the type of rebirth you have is intimately connected with the mind, the last moment of mind in this life. This is why habits matter. Yeah.
But in a way, if it's just the repeating of an action like you describe it, how much can we do for that last one?
Not a lot. This is why we're stuck in samsara. We have uncontrolled death and rebirth because we don't have a lot of control over our habit energies. But the more we get familiar with what states of mind lead to positive results, the more we practice them, the odds are better that we'll have one at the time of death. It's like, say you're dying young and you have small children. So you have a good condition for a lot of attachment to arise, you know. But if you turn that into a mind that just is praying for whatever is best for those kids, that you don't think about, oh, I can't bear to leave them, because it's just attachment. But that you try to, that you kind of think about, oh, I've done all the things I could to, make this, I wrote my will, I have, my savings, there's a guardian, there's whatever it is, you've got all these things in place, then your mind at the time of death, because we have to let go. That's going to happen. The more we can have a mind that can just let go, without any kind of like, oh, but they're my kids. According to the Buddha, everybody's been your kid.
Oh, right.
Since we've been since beginningless
Yeah.
time, you might, this is another good reason to love us all.
What about the people that die, accident, like right away? They don't have.
They don't go through a very fast process. Yep. So that's again why your habits of mind matter. Because if you have a habit of having a positive state of mind, that's thinking about others, that isn't all grasping about, oh, what I want, or, and I'm obsessed with anger or craving or whatever, then if you have one of those moments of death, the odds are good that you'll have one of those positive minds. That's why practice is important. And to recognize, oh, this state of mind is not one I want to keep practicing. Because, I have a really impatient mind. So the odds are good I'll be, sitting in some lane of traffic going, oh, really? Another red light? And bam! Not a good habit. So, we really want to try to kind of go, okay, pointless to keep practicing this state of mind. The only good news I have is that it used to have been rage. So it's not rage anymore, it's impatience. That's a major improvement. So hopefully I won't go straight to the hell rooms. So, we do what one can. So we do. I mean, that's literally, what we're trying to do. If you get all caught up, if you start getting this habit of paranoia about, oh no, that's attachment. If instead you think, oh, well, whatever the next adventure is, may I keep working on wanting to benefit others. And not worry about you. That's the biggest habit. It's just trying to let go of any kind of self-concern. Because we're all, we're going to meet everybody again. It's our attachment to this self. That somehow this self is more important than all you selves. And my friends of this life are the most important. Yeah, they helped you in this life. You had your preferences were in line in this life. But we make it a big deal. We grasp onto it. Oh, but these friends are the friends. I'll never meet anybody that I like as much as these folks. That's not true. It's not even true in this life. Friends come and go. Partners come and go. As I can attest to. It's just, But we cling and we hold on because we think things exist in some sort of permanent, concrete way. And that our happiness depends on it. And that's a mistaken point of view. But this is a big view, so this is why we need a few good rebirths in a row, so we can keep practicing. So this is a good argument for why, if you have some really negative habit of mind that you practice a lot, that you want to tackle that. You know, if you have a lot of jealousy, you know, those kinds of things, anger, jealousy, greed.
Judgmental.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's usually, you know, jealousy or
Right.
pride, one of the two.
So tackling them is you have to meditate and you have to when you know that you, like, say you're thinking about something that you shouldn't, or is a negative thought, to like stop, because usually when I have a negative thought and I say okay stop, it actually gets worse than negative thought. I don't know why,
We'll work on that.
but how can you work on it? Like
The thing, meditation is your practice time.
okay.
First of all, it's practicing being able to tell your mind what to do. You know, it's working on trying to have a calmer mind, less distracted mind, and mostly following your instructions. Now come back to the breath. Come back to the breath. Come back to compassion. Come back to compassion. Come back to compassion. Whatever. You know?
Right.
And sometimes you actually visualize certain experiences that you have, you know, certain circumstances that are a condition for you to lose it. You know, so you picture doing it differently. You know, and then part of what you're learning to do in meditation is paying attention to what's going on in your mind. So you're going to carry that throughout the day, and every now and then realize, ooh, I haven't checked lately. Where is my mind? And then you can interrupt those habits that are not very useful by just saying, I got to do something else because I can't let go of this thought pattern. You know, that you just, you know, so you keep trying to interrupt it, and then that night you might think, okay, now what are the reasons why I don't want to keep my mind going that way? So you review them so they become stronger, as opposed to reviewing the storyline that we usually tell ourselves of rationalizations and justifications for being whatever we're being. So it's a process. So it helps to rely either on a spiritual teacher or teachings, really. Because if we knew if we could just do this naturally, we'd already be enlightened. We need some instructions, because what we're telling ourselves to do right now isn't working. And then we really want to keep practicing the mind that understands that we are impermanent, that this opportunity that we have with this human, the sophisticated brain that we have as a support for our mind doesn't last forever. So we want to make it, the best use of it we can. So when you're thinking about, oh, do I want to read this, murder mystery, or read the Dharma, you want to try occasionally to read the Dharma. So, it's not that we don't need the power of relinquishment. We do need to rest from it, but we also need to, we have to make the effort. Oh, I still need to work on my mind. I need to train. If you're one of these people who really takes good care of your body, and you go to the gym all the time, and you eat healthily, hey, you're missing the biggest component of your aggregates, of that thing you label me, which is the mind. Happiness depends on the mind. Peacefulness depends on the mind. Because we all know you can have a completely healthy, at ease body and have a mind that's a mess. The more important part is the mind. Because you can also have a body that's a complete mess and your mind's fine. And at the time of death, that's what we want. Because the body's failing. So we can, the mind goes on. So it's the more reliable component. It's the one we want to take the best care of. So getting really familiar with what things to adopt, what things to abandon, getting really familiar with the Four Noble Truths, getting really familiar, with your mind and your habits of mind, and really practicing. Noticing all those positive states of mind you have, your generous mind, your patient mind, your wise mind, and help yourself practice those the most. So when you realize your mind's going towards, judgment or, not being too kind, you want to go, let's look at something else. Let's look at this, we're so narrow with our point of view because our point of view is being completely influenced by what we want. Okay. Next week. I don't have any idea what time it is. I don't know.
8:36.
Okay. Yes.
Rebecca asked if we can dedicate today evening and merits for the Rudolph. She just said I can ask.
To Rudolph? Yeah, and we can dedicate, Buddy is another one. Mary Ann asked us to pray for Buddy, another animal, who had surgery today. And of course we want to think of everybody who's suffering, all the people we know personally, people we know and the animals we know. The joy of no projector hum. Because the people that we know and hang out with and work with and all, our families, are people we have a particularly strong recent karmic connection with. That's why they're in our lives this life. So our prayers for those people are more powerful because we have a karmic connection with them in this life. So, the most powerful, it's really good if you have someone sick in your life and you want to, you go to the Kopan's website so you can sponsor a puja done by all the monks and nuns at Kopan. Good idea to do, but there's nothing stronger than your own prayers. So, it's because of that connection. So never skip that part. So, and you can, it's a good habit to get into because it's all about benefiting others. Is to whenever you finish doing something that you think is a positive, habit, whether it's, I don't know, whatever, like this, showing up to class, thinking about things from a different point of view, trying to interrupt your habitual beliefs or assumptions or whatever. Is to bring to mind people you're worried about and dedicate whatever positive results might occur in the future, to benefit them, then they won't, and dedicate them to, to last until there's nobody left in samsara. All of those things, because that gets us in the habit of always thinking about others, so that's the habit. That's a positive mind, to not do everything from the perspective of self, but to do everything from the perspective of other. So, because we're all other. We're all self. We're all in it together, even though we have no real understanding of that now. But we're interconnected, interdependent, and we can help each other. So we want to think about that way now, because we've just finished a class, and all of y'all have shown up after working all day and tired, and really, I'd much rather, eat popcorn and watch something. I don't know, whatever's the thing right now. So it's so tempting. Game of Thrones now is completely available, because I don't watch Game of Thrones.
No, it's done. It's done.
I know it's done, but it's now available on HBO, all of the things. I use it at the beginning. I see it, and I go, no. Don't do it, because I don't want to watch it. But, it's there. So, so I switch over to Ken Burns and college and prison, which is excellent, by the way. So, I've distracted myself completely into oblivion. Okay. So when we choose not to do that, even in those moments, if the habit of rejoicing, oh, I'm so glad I chose not to do that. I'm encouraging myself in a positive direction. We want to be happy about that because, as we know from psychology, it's positive reinforcement, go for it. So, all these little ways, because most of us are really good at beating ourselves up when we do the wrong thing. Well, let's not practice that. So when we're observing our mind all day long and our decisions, we also want to be aware of, we don't just rush over the good stuff, just go, oh, but there I was a jerk. You want to notice all those moments. So, because we have all the qualities we need in order to cultivate to become enlightened. That's our Buddha potential. So we can be thrilled. So we think about that, and then we then we dedicate any results that may ripen in the future. We dedicate them to the great enlightenment, so there are no suffering sentient beings left. And what else? All the people who asked us to pray for them, to Rudolph, who needs a precious, happy rebirth. To all the people on our prayer list, all the people who come to our center, all the friends of FPMT, for success and well-being. And I can't remember what page I want to get to. So,
35.
Yeah, somewhere around there. Let's see, what do we want to do? We're going to, we can do that too, but we're going to do 235 just so you can, these are the traditional, and they have meaning. So, 235. So due to the merits are our positive actions. These are the potencies on our mind stream. It's like what our good stuff in the bank. So due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. So this whole verse is about practicing that habit that's doing stuff in order to be able to benefit others in the future. So you're not thinking about, oh, so I can be happy later, so I can, whatever, have the good life or whatever. It's, it's just a mind training. Let me always be thinking about how I might be of help to others. And then this next verse is about generating the mind. Bodhicitta is that mind that wishes to become enlightened for the benefit of others. So Rinpoche says it's always important to try to do this verse after anything positive, because this is the mind we really want to cultivate. Bodhicitta is one of those minds that once we've cultivated that, it's kind of easy peasy from then on. Because everything you do will be influenced by this mind that wants to become enlightened as soon as possible for the benefit of all others. With that kind of driving all your actions, it's much easier than the mind that goes, oh yeah, but I want to rest now, or I want to eat now, or so. Okay, so may the Supreme Jewel
Bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish but increase more and more.
So the next one is talking about emptiness. It's talking about realizing things as they are, so it's always good to remember emptiness in your dedications because it helps, so we don't cling to, oh, look what I did, because it's empty of it, it's also just merely exist. It's temporary, it comes from causes and conditions, and we have nothing to take pride in because we're learning everything from others, from teachers or whatever, your parents, or, all of our good qualities have been cultivated by kind people who taught us. So if you remember emptiness, it helps protect them from being destroyed by anger. So that's another story for another class. Just as the
The
brave
brave
Manjushri
and
and
Samantabhadra
Samantabhadra
too
realize things as they are, I too dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. I dedicate all these roots of virtues with the dedication praised as the best, by the victorious ones thus gone of the 3 times, so I might perform good works. Okay, so let's read 14. Due to all of these merits, may all the father and mother sentient beings have all happiness, and may all the lower realms be empty forever. Wherever there are bodhisattvas, may all their prayers be accomplished immediately. May I cause all this by myself alone. So this is just about, by myself alone, you'll see that a lot, is really just about, we have to drive ourselves to do this. We can't wait on others. You know, most of us are in cultures that don't agree with any of this, never think about it, never know. So we need to have that self-motivation that helps us, in spite of what other people are doing, you know. So that's sort of why because it's not really that you do anything by we're not independent, so, but it's just really, you know, we have to, we rely on, first you rely on the teachers, you rely on the teachings and all this stuff, but then you have to rely on that inner self that wants to become enlightened. So, okay, we good?
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.